Hello React Native developers, what is going on? In this episode, we are looking at an old problem only to improve its solution by an order of magnitude. So welcome to Can It Be Done in React Native? This week, we build a nice shared element transition.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.
Hello React Native developers, I hope you are well. William here, recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. In this week's episode, we are looking at the Airbnb Shared Transition. Here I have a list of places to rent, and I can tap on one, and the thumbnail of the listing is nicely transitioning from the list view to the detail view, giving the user this wonderful user experience and this visual representation of how things flow within the app. So great user experience, and I can also drag the card around and it nicely transitions back to the list view. I am very excited about this example for three reasons. First, couple of releases of the Expo SDK ago, I don't remember which version, SDK 33 maybe, I saw that Expo was shipping the React Native Shared Element module, and I always wanted to play with this module, get a sense of how far we can take shared transitions using this module, how good it is, and I'm happy that I finally have an excuse to have fun with this module, so I'm very excited about that. The second reason I'm very excited is that a couple of months ago we built the App Store shared transition example in this channel, but the solution we came up with was very ad hoc, plus was already a long time ago, so I'm really looking forward to improve the solution we built almost a year ago by an order of magnitude, and that's what these videos are all about, always improving. And finally, I'm excited because these shared transitions now are really expected part of the baseline user experience in most apps. So these are very common, and as React Native developers, I think that we need to be able to do these very efficiently. So how would we do this in React Native? Well, we're going to use React Native Shared Element, and since we use React Navigation, we're going to use React Navigation Shared Element, which is a binding between React Native Shared Element and React Navigation. Because this module does everything for us, it's kind of magical. Because it's kind of magical, I really wanted to get a sense of what is happening behind the scene. And so I spent some time playing with React Native Shared Element alone. And the way it works is that you, as shown in this example, is that you have two scenes, for instance, in a stack navigator, like in the case of the Airbnb app, and you can register elements which are going to be shared between one screen or the other. And the way you would do this, if you were not using the React Navigation bindings, that you would have API context that would register these nodes. So you keep the reference of the nodes across screens. And when you transition, for instance, in the Stack Navigator, you can overlay a view on top of the Stack Navigator. What Shared Element Transition does is that it measures on the UI thread the size of the first element, of the starting element, the size of the end element, and nicely builds the transition from the start to the end. When the transition is over, the overlaid view is removed. So this is how things happen behind the scene if you use React Native Shared Element. Actually, if you want to build such a custom, for instance, Stack Navigator using React Native Shared Element, there is a lot of things you need to do. So you need a context to register nodes. You need to have the logic to know which node you want to transition from one scene to the other, do the mounting, displaying the transition and so on. And so we get it for free in this nice module thanks to Hein. And so that's what we're going to use. And the second thing we're going to do, so we're going to have a nice transition from one screen to the other, is that we're going to add a pan gesture handler to the detail view. We're going to drag the view, look, so add some scaling and translating to the view. So depending on translate Y, we're going to scale to, let's say, 60%, so to 0.60. And when we release, we calculate where to snap. Do we snap to the middle of the screen or to the top of the screen? In Redash, we have a function that can help us calculate the snap point depending on the translation Y and the Y velocity. X snapbacks to 0 regardless. And if we snap to the bottom, we don't do any animation, but we do a go back in React Native navigation, and then React Navigation Shared Element will do the transition for us. If not, we snap back the view to the top as if nothing happened. So what do you guys think? Can it be done in React Native? Let's have a look. A couple of things before we get started. Christoph Madeira, co-founder of React Native on Android and father of gestures and animations in React Native, has accepted to come on the channel to answer your widest questions about gestures and animations in React Native. So if you have any questions for Christoph, please post them in the comments below. I'll make sure to ask him. And I am really looking forward to record with this Q&A session with him. And if you want to meet Christoph in person, as well as the great people from the React Native community, you can join us at App.js Conf this April in Krakow. I'll be giving a workshop on declarative gestures and animations. I have a limited amount of discount codes for conference tickets or for tickets to the workshop on gestures and animations. If you're interested, you can email me. My email is in the video description, and I will send you a discount code if there are still some available. And last but not least, if you want to learn the fundamental of gestures and animations in React Native, please check out my online course at startreactnative.dev. My goal with this course is to provide you with all the tools and knowledge necessary in order to build delightful user experiences in React Native that will run at 60 FPS, even on low-grade Android devices. By following this curriculum, all the recipes we use in the Can It Be Done React Native series should feel trivial. And hopefully you could look at a complex example like we do in the series and have all the primitives in mind and the knowledge necessary in order to deploy these primitives to build incredible user experiences. Alright guys, let's get started. So here I have a boilerplate project which you can download from the video description if you want to follow along with this example. And I have the list of views. So simple stack navigator, explore, which is this list you see here, and listing, which is the detail view that you see here. And I can navigate to one and navigate back. So we're going to do this in 2 steps. First, we're going to replace the create stack navigator by the create shared element stack navigator. It's a drop-in replacement from the React stack navigator from React Navigation. And in each view, we need to specify which elements we want to apply the shared transition on. And this, in our case, this is going to be the images in this view and in this view. Once this works, we're going to apply a pan gesture handler to this view so we can drag. Once we release the gesture, we're going to calculate the snap point. Do we snap the card back in position or do we go back in the navigation? If we go back to the navigation, on our side, we stop moving any pixels and we let React Navigation shared element do the transition nicely back to the detail view. So let's get started and let's replace the create stack navigator with create shared element stack navigator. And now, so we have this drop-in replacement. And now what we need to do is in each view, specify the shared elements. So in Explore, I have these listings and each listing has an image. So we're going to wrap the image with a shared element component. So I'm going to put it here. Because I'm not 100% sure, but by reading the documentation, because an image needs some, in compared to some other views, needs some special processing because of the resizing, I think it's important that the shared element, the direct child of shared element is an image. Because that way, React Native shared element knows that you transition on an image and there might be some special processing to do. Not 100% sure, but it certainly looks that way. You don't want some, flickering of the image to be resized in the transition in a way that is different from the way it is on the next screen. And here as ID, I'm gonna use the listing ID. So shared element, we can import from React Navigation shared element. So that's for the listing, and we need to do the same for the detail. Oh, that's the detail view. We need to do the same. No, sorry. I have the same components here. We need to do the same for the detail view here. So I have the same image and I need to use shared element. And the ID is the listing ID. Looking good. Now, because here you see we have two shared elements, we need to specify to the module which elements we need to transition on, namely the one we click on. So we're going to use the shared elements config that we can see here. So I'm going to add this method to the listing component, and I'm going to need the navigation. Let me just add some type quickly. It's a return type of the type of use navigation. And we get listing as a parameter. So when I click on the listing, I pass as parameter the listing detail. So I know what to display as information and which image we need to show. So if I go back here, we get the listing and we return the listing ID as the element we need to transition on. Let's have a look. So here it seems to nicely transition from one to the other. So here we need to, I think we need to also update the transition of the content because it kind of looks strange. So let's have a look. I'm gonna, I think it's called card style interpolator. You can pass a function as parameter. We're gonna need the progress value. So it's current progress, which is a animated value from React Native animated, vanilla animated, not reanimated. And so we need to return a card style. And here I'm gonna use just some opacity, which we're gonna essentially match with the progress animation value. I think, let's have a look. Yeah, that looks good. So here we have a really nice transition. And so what we can do now is to make the card draggable. So this is the listing view. We're going to add a pan gesture handler around the view. So pan gesture handler. First child of a pan gesture handler needs to be an animated view. And this is where we're going to add the translate and scale animation values. Animated we get from reanimated. We need, so a pan gesture handler, a gesture handler. We have from reanimated convenience function to create this handler. So we have a gesture handler. We're going to have use memo1 with no dependencies. And we're going to use on gesture event. On gesture event is the helper function from Redash to create the gesture handler. You see, because we need to pass a handler in these two properties. We use memo1 so that the identity of the handler is not changed across renderings. And this is very important because if the identity of one of these functions change across rendering, you're going to lose the pan gesture handler. And here we're going to pass as parameters the animation values we need. So what kind of animation value do we need? We need translation X, translation Y. We need the velocity Y to calculate the snap point. We need the gesture state, of course. And we're going to create these animation values using use values, which is just a wrapper between use memo1 and value creation in provided by Redash. So we can create these animation values in a way that is a bit more compact and a bit faster. So velocity Y, state, and here I can set the default value. So we have 0, 0, 0, and state undetermined. And state comes from, yes, React Native gesture handler. Now we're going to need more animation values. We're going to need translate X. So the actual translation we're going to apply. The reason usually we interpolate translate X and translate Y. Here we create an animation value for it because when we release the gesture and we agreed that the snap point should go back to the previous view, we don't want to move any pixels anymore and let React Native Shared Element do the transition. So by having an animation value for translate X and translate Y, we just have a nice way to either assign values to these animation values or stop the animation. And we need another animation value, which is should snap back, where we decide if we go back in the stack navigation or we snap the animation back to the top. So I need new default values. So it's going to be 0, 0, 0. All right. So now we can have a use code handler with no dependencies. Just gonna add a block of instructions. And so the first thing is we need to assign the should snap back in order to know if we need to snap to go back. If we want to go back, we call back into the JavaScript userland and do a navigation, go back. Very simple. So I can write this condition: if should snap back, we call back to the JavaScript. We don't need to pass any animation values as parameter, and we do a go back. To know if we need to snap back or not, we need to calculate the snap point. So we have a helper function in order to do that in Redash. So we can create snap2, and we're going to use snap point. First is the parameter is the value. So here we're going to look at translate, translation y, velocity y, and the snap points are either 0 back to the top of the screen or middle of the screen. So it's going to be height divided by 2. Let me just maybe create this into a constant, because we're going to need it in different places. So I'm going to create snapback is height divided by 2. So we need to set should snapback to 1 if we need to. So we're going to have a condition. First I need to import these guys here and call. So if should snapback is false, so if it's already true, we don't want to do anything. So we check first if it's false, and the snap2 is equal to snapback. And the gesture is not active, of course. If these conditions are met, then we assign should snapback to 1. If we shouldn't snap back and the gesture is active, so and the gesture is finished, state.end, we want to have a transition back to 0. So I'm going to have a block here. And if not, we want to assign to translate x and translate y the translation values. So set translate x equals translation x, same for y. And here we want to use some timing function. So I'm just going to use timing from Redash. We go, so from translation or translate x, no translation, that's the same. Translate x to 0 and translate y to 0. Timing we get, I cannot see, so we get from Redash. Perfect. And let's apply the values here. So I'm going to do transform. So we have translate x, translate y, and we can create a scale animation value, animation node. So we can create scale, and we interpolate on translation y, or on translate y, sorry. And I think, yeah, here that's correct. So input range, we go from 0 to snap back. And the output range, at 0 the scale is 1, at snapback let's say it's 0.62. Extrapolate clamp. Let's have a look. Let's see. Some syntax error. So we have a block, I think. No. Oh. We have some syntax error here. Okay. Looks good. Here, we're gonna need, so let me see if I can drag the card around, snaps back to position, and here it goes back. I don't like here the dependency list, and I'm gonna ignore it because we know what we're doing, and I am afraid that here the identity of snap2, because we take values from an array, so here the identity of snap2 is gonna change always, because we just return values. We don't return an animation value which gets updated. We return one of these values from the array. So the identity is gonna change, which is gonna trigger a new side effect in UseCode, and I really don't want to do that. So even though it looked like it kind of worked, I want here to disable. So ESLint disable, next line. Yes, perfect. So let's have a look. So I can tap, drag the card around. The scaling looks good. Maybe it's a bit too strong. And it snaps back to position. Now you see the content in the background is invisible. So what we can do here is add modal. I have already the card style. Okay, so I think here, because the transition, because we switched to modal mode, the transition spec has changed. So I'm just gonna create opacity and interpolate it from progress. So input range 0, 1, output range 0, 1, extrapolate clamp. Sorry, just so used to the reanimated syntax. This is vanilla animated. Let's have a look. So it moves, but it's still not transparent. I think it's because of this background here. Let's see. So now it's transparent, but we need some content. Maybe here. Let's see. So now it looks good. The scale is a bit too strong, I would say. But put 0.8. But we really have now a very cool, so yeah, snap back, snap to place. Now we need to apply the final step, which is when dragging the view, we want the thumbnail in the background to be hidden. So we're gonna, in the listing component, we're gonna add a state, which is the opacity of the thumbnail. So opacity set opacity. So UseState default value is 1. When we navigate, we set the opacity to 0. And so I'm gonna add the opacity to the style of the image. So we have styles, image, and opacity. Now, when the focus of the background view is gained, we reset the opacity to 1. So I'm gonna use isFocused, and we're gonna create a use effect on the it's as focus, because is focused is a function, so as focus is focused. So we're going to create a side effect on as focus. If it has the focus, we set the opacity to 1. Let's have a look. Okay, so here the thumbnails are visible. I can tap, move the card around, in the background it disappeared, and it snaps back to position. So you see this weird effect here that we have right now, and that we had before, and I did derived, this was stupid. I mean, it's not, I derived an animation node from the progress animation value. Obviously this doesn't change anything. So I'm gonna rename it, but I think what happens is you see this progress animation, I mean now it works, but this progress animation value is changed because of the gesture of the stack navigator. So I can disable it here and the problem will nicely disappear. So I can tap, move the card around, whoop, snaps back to position, can tap, snap here, go back. A very cool example of shared transition in React Native. Now these shared transitions are expected part of the baseline in a mobile user experience. And I'm really excited that in React Native, we get a great primitive in order to build these shared transitions. This is not the last shared transitions we're going to build together. I'm really looking forward to build more complex shared transitions with you on this channel. So I'm really looking forward to talk to you soon, and in the meantime, happy hacking.